Okay, I'm going to be reading from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, starting at verse 1. It says, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ," or in the Hebrew it would have said, by our coming of Yahushua HaMashiach, "and our gathering together unto him." Notice this verse here, it says that Paul was talking about here the coming of Yahushua HaMashiach and the gathering unto him. Now, the gathering together unto him is in reference to the rapture. At the rapture, all true believers in the Messiah that are on the earth when he comes to catch us away, as he promised according to John chapter 14 verses 1 down through verse 3, that he was going away and that he would come back for us and receive us unto himself. He was going to the Father's house. He would come back for us and take us to be where he was. Where he was is in the Shamayim, or in heaven. He's not coming at the rapture to be with us here. He's coming to take us to be where he is, which is in the Shamayim, or in heaven, to be in the Father's house. This is a promise that he has made to the church, and this promise has only been made to the church. It's not a promise to Israel or Yasharel. Now, a Jew or Yahudim, if they come to faith in the Messiah before the rapture, of course, that promise would apply to them. But it only applies to those that are in the church. And again, when I'm talking about the church, I'm talking about not a church building. I'm not talking about necessarily organization or Christianity or anything. When I use the word church, I'm talking about an assembly of believers who the Messiah said in Matthew chapter 16, he said upon the revelation that he was going to build his church or his assembly, and the Hebrew word would have been kahel, that he was going to build his assembly upon the revelation of who he was. Remember this particular instance, Peter recognized who the Messiah was. He said, because the Messiah asked, "Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And Peter had the correct answer. He said, "Thou art the Mashiach, the Son of the living Elohim." And then the Messiah said, "Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, Peter, but my Father which is in heaven." And then he said, "And upon this rock," or upon this foundation, see, a rock represents a foundation. He said, "Upon this foundation, I will build my church." See, up until that time, or his assembly, until that time, there was no church. There was no assembly, because there was no one born of the Ruach HaKodesh, of the Spirit, because the price for redemption had not been paid yet. It wasn't until after the Mashiach died on the cross, and on the day of Shavuot, or Pentecost, was the Spirit poured out upon the believing Jewish believers in the upper room. The 120 were filled with the Ruach HaKodesh as they began to speak in tongues, as the Spirit was poured out upon them. And so, when he made reference to building his assembly upon the revelation of who he was. Now, this applies to Jew and Gentile people, to all people of the earth who will put their faith and trust in the Messiah and recognize who he is. He said that he was going to build his assembly based upon that. So when I use the word church, that's the group of people that I'm talking about. The group of people that have come to faith in the Messiah, whether you be a Jew or a Gentile. And so when Paul says here that he says, "I beseech you, brethren, by the coming of Yahushua HaMashiach," of course, that's a reference to the actual the coming when he will come to the earth at the end of the tribulation, where he'll put down the enemies of Yasharel. He'll deliver them from the enemies of Yasharel at the battle of Armageddon. And but prior to that coming, he's going to gather together the believers on the earth that are in Messiah to fulfill a promise according to John chapter 14, that he's coming back for us. And now Paul made reference to this over in chapter 1, where he talked about in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18, that he talked about that we would be caught up together to meet Yahushua in the air, and so shall we ever be with him. That's a total different situation than at the actual second coming, where actually we are coming back with him according to Revelation chapter 19. And to rule and reign with him. And so that's a different scenario than the actual gathering together. The gathering together is together those that have died before us in Messiah and those that are alive on the earth. The Bible taught, Paul even made reference to this in Ephesians chapter 1 verse 10, that he might get that at the dispensation of the fullness of time. In other words, there's an appointed time, according to what Paul said in Ephesians chapter 1, you can go back and read this in chapter 1 verse 10, that at the dispensation of the fullness of times, he might gather together all things in Messiah, both which are in heaven and which are on earth. That is the rapture. That is a reference to the rapture, because all true believers in Messiah will be called up, whether they have died before the event or if they're alive on the earth when he comes. Then that we will be called up together. We'll be gathered together, and we'll experience our resurrection. This mortal will put on immortality. This corruptible shall put on incorruption. Now, I'm going to stop it here because I really want to get into a lot more detail here about the falling away. And what is the falling away? And there's a lot of confusion about the falling away. And I think if we clear this up, you're going to have a clear understanding, and you're going to be more convinced of your position of the pre-tribulation rapture more than ever when you understand what Paul was actually saying in these first few verses of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Well, thank you for your time this afternoon. And please, again, share my videos with others. And I thank you for all your encouragement, all your support. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so and encourage others to do as well. Until next time, shalom.